Hi guys, it's Danny. So today we'll continue the repotting guide by discussing a bit about the things that are happening or not happening in our orchid pots. Now, hopefully this won't get too boring as it's a rather chemistry discussion, but if I feel it gets too boring, I'll just show you some cat pictures. Hopefully you'll enjoy them. Okay, so last time I told you that I don't believe there are any good microorganisms available to transfer to the new medium from the old medium. So I'd like to develop this discussion a little and to tell you what I think about it. Okay, first off, I'm not a chemist or an orchid expert by any means, so whatever I say here is based on my belief, logic, and experience, and what I've read on the internet and all the research. So I'm not saying it is the absolute truth, so I don't have a lab equipment to measure everything. So anyway, it's just an idea to think about and research more. So most of my chemistry knowledge actually comes from dealing with planted tanks for a lot of years, which fortunately helps me in other fields as well, as I've discovered recently. Okay, so anyway, you know how people say that they like to use parts of the old medium with the new one to transfer good microorganisms to the new sterile medium. Well, ever wonder what those microorganisms could be? Well, I guess to fit the description, they should not affect the plant or harm it in any way. So they should not produce anything toxic in the pot, nor should they feed on the orchid, obviously. Second, to call them useful, they should provide something for the orchid, like a balance. I'm referring here to a balance of certain values in the pot. And third, it wouldn't harm to be able to feed the plant somehow. And that would be spectacular if we can have something like that. Well, luckily I know just some little critters that do just that. And no, they're not the microorganisms responsible for decaying medium, if that's what you're wondering. I guess you don't. Anyway, the only way I can present them is by describing a part of a very popular natural process called the nitrogen cycle. Now, nitrogen is all around us in the air, and since it's just so abundant, it was obvious that living things had to adapt to be able to consume it somehow. And unfortunately, plants cannot consume nitrogen as is, like we humans don't eat raw meat anymore, because it's not tasty, and well, it's rather messy, isn't it? And we have evolved and developed a taste for finer things, like cooked food. This is what plants did, to make the story short. I'll refer only to the part of this cycle that interests us. In nature, microbes, bacteria, and other little critters that are responsible for organic matter decay play a crucial role in the nitrogen cycle. In the decomposition process, some important substances are produced, like carbon dioxide and ammonium, which is one of the compounds in which nitrogen can be found in nature, produced by decomposition processes. Now, because there was an offer of ammonium, some organisms had to appear to consume it. Who would pass on free food, right? So here come into play our heroes. I won't bother you with the name, but let's call them nitrifying bacteria number 1. These types of bacteria are specialized in consuming ammonium, but they eliminate a byproduct called nitrite. Same rules apply where there is an offer, someone has to come in and take it. And thus nitrifying bacteria number 2 comes into play, which consumes nitrates and produce nitrates. Now, this nitrate is easier to take up by plants, in my opinion, because of some biological and chemical explanation that I won't mention, as it is very boring and no amount of cat pictures can cover it. So, the offer of nitrate is gladly accepted by all plants on this earth. Of course, there are some types of plants that do consume ammonium, and maybe plants in general do consume a slight amount of ammonium. But for personal reasons and beliefs, I would say that it is not so easy to consume as nitrate is. Now, some types of legumes are even nitrogen fixators, but you're not interested in that, and they're not the case of our study here. Also, I tend to believe that ammonium and nitrates can easily become toxic for plants in smaller quantities than nitrates. Not to mention they are very toxic to you, to humans in general, and their value in drinking water should be 0. while a maximum value of 10 milligrams per liter of nitrate is acceptable for humans. So in conclusion, we can say that these nitrifying bacteria who do all this process with ammonium conversion are the ones that create this balance and good environment for orchids. Decaying bacteria start to break down the medium, then these bacteria come in to fix everything, and the orchid gets some food out of it, and a toxic-free medium, right? Well, actually not. What I didn't mention is that these little bacteria need certain conditions to survive, which unfortunately I don't think are met in our orchid pots. Not in the vast majority of our pots anyway. So first off, they need oxygen because they are aerobic bacteria. Well, no problems there, I guess. Then they need constant moisture. This might be a problem as we always tend to let our orchid pots dry out pretty much between waterings. And the small colony that might develop slowly, I might add, in our orchid pots is significantly lowered, if not killed altogether, each time we let the pot dry up. And if this wasn't enough, the chlorine in our tap water will surely do the trick, as most of us water our orchids with tap water. I am saying most of us, not all of us. And anyway, small little note here, this is why a fish tank has cloudy waters and smells bad, and everything inside it dies after a few days. Because you might wash the filter media and everything in the sink with tap water. And I should tell you, a tank should never be sterile. Your best weapon against disease and algae bursts and stuff like that are these bacteria that need to survive. But more about this on Google, you can just search it. I just gave you the idea. You're welcome. I'm kidding. Well, you might ask, why don't the decaying microorganisms die when subjected to dry conditions or too wet conditions or chlorine? Well, I'll just answer this with one idea. The older you are, the more adapted you become. Decaying microorganisms are both aerobic and anaerobic. This means they don't really need oxygen. Certainly, they don't need large amounts of water, as they can do with whatever the media has. And to support this, did you ever see an orchid pot that lasted intact for 10 years? I don't think so. Also, you know how you put your food in the freezer to make it last longer? Well, it doesn't really stop the process. It can last for a few months, but the process doesn't really stop. So if freezing conditions can't stop the decaying bacteria, you think a little chlorine would? I don't think so. Okay, there is another idea closely related to this that I like to address. You remember many sources suggest that if you are using bark medium with orchids, you should use a higher nitrogen fertilizer. Now, the reason behind it was that they were saying that in the decaying process, nitrogen would be used up by decaying bacteria, and the orchid would be deprived of nitrogen and starved. I'm sure you know this one. I've never quite understood it myself, because if what I just said earlier were true, then the decaying bacteria would produce nitrogen, not consume it. And even if they would consume nitrogen, they would consume it as the natural form of it, which plants cannot take. Anyway, orchids can't take up nitrogen, as I was saying, neither ammonium, I believe. So, I don't think this idea was ever valid. Anyway, recently, I have discovered some things that suggest I might be right. Google doesn't help me much, but as this is not a life and death matter, there's not a lot of info about it. But I did find 3 links from the American Orchid Society that for the life of me don't load anymore. I think they moved their server. From the cache copy, though, I can see 3 little links that make my day. And the third one says, once it was understood that orchids grown in bark needed a higher nitrogen fertilizer. This assertion is now not nearly as well supported as it used to be. So yay, I think I might be right on this one. Anyway, let's get back to our business. Of course, there are many studies and many beliefs and many theories that would support or contradict what I have just exposed today. But since I'm not a scientist, nor do I believe there are too many articles for me to get a clearer idea, I will just stick to my logic, as I know how these values affect aquatic plants, and terrestrial plants shouldn't really be that much different in their essence. Of course they are different, but in essence they all started from the same place. Anyway, if you have other ideas or other beliefs or other things to support otherwise, please share them with me because I can, learn something new today from you guys. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this and you weren't too bored. So yeah, not sure how this will help you in your orchid care because it really doesn't matter that much. Maybe it does matter to a certain degree. Maybe it's the thing that makes the difference. I don't know. But certainly I believe that using old medium or pieces of the old medium with the new one, it's really not going to significantly help you in any way. So you might as well don't hassle with it. If you're lazy like me, don't do it. It doesn't affect you much. Plus I like to make the sketches. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe and leave me any questions you might have in a comment. And hopefully this wasn't too boring. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.